Mark your calendar for Thursday, July 11th. My comedy special, Maternal Instinct, will be released out into the world. It will be available publicly on YouTube, and I am doing a live where I will be in the little chat box thing. I will be interacting with people at 7 p.m. Central. That is 8 p.m. East. That is 5 p.m. Pacific. I can't wait to see you guys there, and I would love to chat with you. I think I should be able to reply to everyone's comments, and I would really appreciate that support. And that will be on my record label's YouTube channel. That will be on the 800-Pound Gorilla YouTube channel. So you will have to go look up my YouTube channel and like and subscribe and just go through all my videos systematically and watch everyone till the end and hit the like button and leave a comment as a separate project. This is released on the 800-Pound Gorilla record label YouTube channel. That is Thursday, July 11th. The live begins at 7 p.m. Central, and I will be chatting with people, and I would very deeply appreciate you being there because 800-Pound Gorilla is a big record label, and so this will be out there for all just the random comedy fans of the world. I need some of my people there, okay? I need someone like on my team being there. And if you see any crazy comments, that's just random comedy fans being crazy. Thursday, July 11th, 7 p.m. Central. What we are going to talk about today is this. I think that a lot of you have more trauma than you realize. I think you are triggered more often than you realize, but you don't want to accept that or think about it or deal with it anyway because you're a sweet person who is trying to be grateful for your life. And you are probably thinking something like, look, Jen, I grew up middle class. My parents were pretty good people. You know, did my mom occasionally have a cocktail and say the F word? You know, look, maybe it happened, but like it wasn't, I was not a child soldier in Somalia. We had a Yard of the Month club in our neighborhood and we won many times. I was an honor student, whatever, you know, like I think that out of a lovely, well-intentioned sense of gratitude for the blessings you have been given, you would not ever apply the word trauma to yourself because you're trying to honor people who have grown up in extreme poverty in war zones. And certainly you would never talk about being triggered because we think of the only people who are triggered or certainly who talk about being triggered as they're furries or, you know, they identify as like, I'm a cat or whatever. Yeah, I mean, we do kind of, let's face it. I mean, has anyone ever talked about being triggered who doesn't have pink hair? I mean, there's a type, right? And usually the people who talk about being triggered are the ones who have the least actual problems in their lives. That is the perception. I'm just saying is the perception. I have friends with pink hair. My kids have friends who have pink hair. So I'm not categorically saying that everyone in that category is crazy. I mean, I'm crazy. So, you know, welcome to the club. But I am trying to lay out the perception that I think a lot of people have. I bet you anything, 99% of my podcast listeners, I know you guys very well. You have never said you were triggered by something, and you would never want to say that. But I think you are more than you realize. And so I would like to suggest that we come up with some new words that will make you all more comfortable dealing with some pent-up stress and psychological issues that might be dragging you down. When you have psychological stress that is unprocessed, and that's all trauma is, it is unprocessed stress, it can lead to chronic pain. I had dozens of doctor visits. I was in so much pain. When I was at SiriusXM, I almost quit my job just over the pain. I ended up quitting that job for other reasons, but I was in so much chronic pain during that time that I could barely function. And it turns out it was unprocessed stress. It was straight out of a Dr. Sarno book. It was unprocessed stress. And when I dealt with the unprocessed stress, the pain went away. I've been chronic pain free for years now, for 5-6 years. And so that's one of the things it can cause. It can cause fixation. It can even cause symptoms similar to Asperger's, anxiety, like severe anxiety disorders, ADHD. Obviously, these are real things, and some people just purely have that psychological thing. But there are some people who have a lot of unprocessed stress that is making it seem like they have some of these things that actually, if they could just process the stress, then a lot of those symptoms would go away. And that's why I want to talk to you guys about this. And I will tell you what elicited this train of thought. But before, okay, so I want us to come up with different words other than trauma and trigger that might make you all more comfortable bringing them into the lexicon of how you think about your life. Why don't we call trauma unprocessed stress? And instead of saying this unprocessed stress can trigger you, let's say it can shift you. Because when you are triggered in the classic sense of the word, your brain chemistry actually changes. We will talk about this later. Your brain chemistry, you actually have the same neurological patterns as you did when the original trauma took place. So if you had a really difficult thing happen when you were 13 and you simply didn't have the mechanism to release that stress, if something reminds you of that today, your brain will start firing in the same way as it did back when you were 13 and those things happen. And I even have MRI images that we're going to show. This is going to be an episode with MRI images and the whole thing. I'm literally going to solve your problems on this episode. How is this podcast free? I'm going to solve all of your problems on this episode. And if you only remember one thing from this episode, I want you to make it this. My comedy special comes out on YouTube on July 11th, and that's what we should all be focusing on right now. And I really need you to leave a comment to help me in the algorithm. But the second thing, if you only remember two things from this episode, it's that in order to have symptoms of trauma, what we are going to now call unprocessed stress, in order to have symptoms, in order to have that to an extent that it is causing you problems and it's worth dealing with, it's not about the severity of the badness of what you went through. It's about, did you have systems in place to process it? It's about the processing. It's not about the badness of what happened. And I've said this before, that this explains why sometimes people of my generation would talk to old timers who were born in, 1915, like way back in the day. And they'd be like, oh yeah, Poppy used to beat us with the tire iron when we would, and I'd be like, what? And they genuinely did not seem traumatized by this. And I think part of it is they lived in villages. They would go down to the creek and the river with their cousins and they'd go make fun of their dad and be like, my dad was like, I'm my dad. And frankly, that is actually a really healthy way to process trauma. You take power over it by telling a different story, telling an empowering story where you frankly that belittle the situation that happened. You take power over it and you do it with someone else, someone who is a safe space, so to speak. Boy, we're using all the hippie words in this episode. All of I mean, we're just don't worry, I'm not going to get out crystals by the end of the episode. We haven't gone that, but yeah, Caitlin's like, I have some right here. Like, totally Caitlin's going to be over there with her dream catcher, but preferably, maybe not even preferably. I mean, this is Dr. Jen's purely anecdotal experience, but I think it's almost a requirement, especially for childhood things that happened, to have another person to be able to listen and hear and be receptive to your empowering story. Again, if you had a father who was occasionally lost his temper or something back in 1915, and you'd go down to the creek with your cousins and, you'd sort of make fun of him. I think that was an important component of it, that your cousins could relate. Maybe they had similar fathers and they would hear your empowering story. Frankly, maybe even making up a little fictional, and I stood up to him and I told him, and maybe it didn't even really happen. But what matters is you told an empowering story. By the way, this is one of the reasons I love comedy, because if you can laugh at something, it means that you have taken power over it. Victims, when they are in victim mentality, can't laugh at whatever caused their victimization. But sometimes if you can find a way to laugh at it, that essentially belittles it. You are belittling a situation if you can find something to laugh at about it. And if you've ever thought of, if you've ever watched any comedy special, I don't know, like Maternal Instinct, which comes out on YouTube, on the 800 Pound Gorilla YouTube channel on July 11th. If there's ever been any comedy that you've watched that really just sent you, like you were rolling, I guarantee you there was something in there. There was something in that subject that you wanted to take power over. And by laughing at it, it gave you this sense of relief that some big, scary monster in your mind was now made very small and silly through the power of your laughter. So let's say back in childhood, you had pretty minor trauma. Maybe sometimes your mom used a really bad tone of voice. Maybe one day your mom told you you didn't look that good in a dress. You were too heavy to wear that dress. Okay, look, that's not the worst thing in the world. But if you didn't have a mechanism to get that trauma out, if you didn't have anyone to laugh with, to, just belittle the situation, like, oh, she should have seen what I was gonna wear, to just get it out that way, you may very well have stored trauma, which we're not calling trauma now, we're going to call it unprocessed stress. You may have unprocessed stress that presents itself, that rears its ugly head in your life, frankly, pretty similar to someone who maybe went through something pretty difficult. Because again, it's not about the badness of what happened. It's about, did you have a mechanism to deal with it? I think a really powerful example is right at this moment, I keep hearing loud noises outside of our podcast door. And see, after this episode, I will talk to Caitlin and I will rant about it. And I'll be like, why can't I have nice things? And see, that will process the stress. But and I think this is especially true for things that happened in your childhood. I think as adults, we have a little bit of a higher tolerance and ability to process stress. But things that happen when you were younger, I think because by definition, you didn't have a lot of power in your own life when you were a kid. I mean, your parents controlled everything. I think that is actually why it's that powerlessness that leads you to easily have blocked stress and unprocessed stress. And again, the reason this matters is because so many things that you think are just part of who you are, maybe being like a crazy neat freak like I am. Just kidding. I'm the opposite. Or like in my case, frankly, dissociating to the point that your kids can rip up pieces of paper, tape them on the living room wall, and you literally don't notice for 3 weeks. That is something that actually happened, and it tells you the level of dissociation that I am capable of. And I know someone on the other hand, she was joking the other day. She's like, literally, it's my childhood trauma is why my house looks like this. And it's seriously off of one of those TikToks of, when they do the restocking and you look at their fridge and it looks like a brand new fridge. Everything is sparkling. There is not one thing that is even close to expiring in there. And they have like the little mini fruit cups that they put in the special holder that is just for mini fruit cups. So her house is like that. And she joked, she was like, this is my childhood trauma in action, because that's just what makes her feel safe. And so whether it's me dissociating and not seeing massive messes, her being a super neat freak, one of the things I've seen a lot coming from the mean streets of the Catholic ghetto is that people can, that frankly use their religion. They can fixate in unhealthy ways on their religion, and it's all about avoiding that unprocessed trauma. And certainly pain. If you have back pain, if you have interstitial cystitis, if you have migraines, I'm telling you, if you've been to a lot of doctors and they consistently can't find anything that's wrong, I'm telling you, I really think that you should look into this unprocessed stress angle. And maybe you haven't been doing that because, again, you weren't a child soldier, so you didn't feel legitimate in doing that. By the way, we're still in setup. So this is a record 16-minute setup. I just want to point out that you have already gotten more value in the setup of this podcast than probably the last 3 podcasts you listened to. So we will continue our journey of exploration of how this podcast could possibly be free, and how I don't have sponsors to this podcast. Like how I lose money on this podcast is unbelievable. It's like, when you think of me, you should think of like, remember what Mother Teresa did in the streets of Calcutta, just out of pure love. She got nothing in return. She would just pick up lepers, off the sidewalks, and she'd, wash their sores and all that. And she'd give them a place. That's literally me with this podcast, because I somehow make no money on this thing. And it doesn't have 1 million views per episode. And we can't figure it out when it adds this much value. Okay. Well, if you're new here, welcome to the Jen Fulwiler Show. I am coming to Birmingham, Alabama on July 25th. Caitlin will be with me at that one. That'll be a lot of fun. Huntsville, Alabama on August 21st. Nashville, Tennessee on August 22nd. I don't know. Are you coming to those?
I don't know about the rest yet. Just
okay. All right. We'll talk about that later. So Caitlin might be at those, but she will be in Birmingham. I cannot wait to see you guys. You can get those tickets at the link in the show notes. Of course, you can always watch this podcast on YouTube in addition to listening to it on your audio apps. And you can look up my YouTube channel and all that, JF on youtube.com. As usual, we will get to the main topic, which I just spent 16 minutes setting up in the second half of the show. We always talk about intro stuff in the first half of the show. We get to that main topic in the second half of the show. We are coming to you from Austin, Texas, and I am your host, Jen. I am a best-selling author, stand-up comic, and mom of 6. And the Jen Fulwiler Show is the podcast where you learn the art of the village hustle. That's being a hot girl boss, or hot boy boss who knows that love and family and community are the foundations of all true success. We publish new episodes every Wednesday morning, except we have had to take a couple Wednesdays off recently because of summer craziness, but generally, we publish new episodes every Wednesday morning. Caitlin White is our fabulous producer. You can find out how to work with her. She does video editing, consulting, things like that. That link is in the show notes. Okay, so because I had to pre-tape episode 210, it's been like 3 weeks since we have done this podcast. I've lived 1,000 lives. Literally. So, it's so much. So much has happened that I want to catch you up on. In fact, some of it we're going to have to go into in the next episode. But the first thing is I had my shows in North Carolina and South Carolina. What an adventure the South Carolina shows were. So much happened there. One thing is, in general, I love the Greenville crowds. I love Greenville. I love the crowds there. But Caitlin there was an evening show, a late show. I actually don't think any of my fans were there. It was just comedy club people. I've never seen a crowd like that. This was a character building experience. One of my good friends, a comedian named Andrew Stanley, he is so funny. It's crazy. Thank God I don't know if he's announcing that he has a special in the works, but let me just say that you need to keep your eye on Andrew Stanley. Go follow him on all social media. This is how funny he is. When I had the privilege of him being part of my show in Atlanta, and he was so funny that I had multiple waiters come find me after the show and be like, who was that guy who was just on stage? Because he was hysterical. And I mean, waiters from all different backgrounds and demographics. And then I had a bunch of my family was there, and then they were texting me afterwards, like, let me get that guy's name. I got to follow him everywhere. I've performed, in so many different places. And that happens sometimes because the people that I work with tend to be amazing, but I've never had that many people. I mean, it was like I was having to answer so many questions. Who was that guy? Who was that guy? So Andrew Stanley is one of the funniest human beings alive on earth. And so he just so happened to be in Greenville. And so first of all, that was super cool. Like, what are the odds? Like, you go to Greenville, you don't expect to be running into incredibly, talented comedian people who just happen to be there. And well, maybe you do, because evidently Greenville's a great comedy city. And so he went up first on my show. And the crowd wasn't giving him a lot. Caitlin and I were sitting there. We were just about to scream. We were laughing so hard. This crowd, it was like, have you ever seen the Twilight Zone episode where, I don't remember any of the details. I just remember that some forces like took all the people off a plane and replaced them with dead bodies. And somebody walked out and realized everyone on the plane had been replaced by, or maybe it wasn't bodies, maybe it was zombies, or I don't know. The point is, that was my crowd at the Late Show in Greenville, South Carolina. I don't know what they were there to do, but it was not laugh. I mean, they gave us nothing. Brandon Rainwater, very funny guy, very funny. They gave him nothing. And the thing is, I'm contractually obliged to do a full hour of comedy because that's how the servers make their money. What you might want to do if you are me is say, this crowd, listen, we have an invasion of the body snatchers situation in this comedy club. The people who are supposed to be here have been replaced by pod people from a different planet. And they don't understand English or anything because they're pod people. They're part of an alien race. And so I'm just going to do 5 minutes and get off stage because these people are not here for comedy. That's what you want to do. But you need to stay on stage so that people will keep ordering drinks and food because that's how the club makes their money. I had to sit there for 60 minutes. And it was like a monologue. It was like I did a 60-minute Shakespearean monologue with people just sitting there listening. It was hell. So that was a character building experience. Let me tell you, standing up on the stage with these people just staring at you. I mean, like Brandon and Andrew were like, that was so horrible. And they only had to do like 10, 20 minutes. I did 60 minutes of people not laughing at my hot fire jokes. It's so terrible. But so I've luckily I had a bunch of shows in Greenville. So the others were great, but that I don't know what happened. It was really, they were pod people. That's what I'm convinced that was, if you've ever seen the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I think that's what happened at that show. But that's why, character building experience. Speaking of trauma, there's something I need to do some somatic release to get over that. Okay. So then the next thing is, Greenville is just the place that things happen for me. So first of all, it was so good to see Andrew Stanley, who is, again, not from Greenville. He just happened to be there. So then I find out at the last minute that they canceled my Sunday shows. I was supposed to have 2 shows on Sunday, and they bumped me because Bert Kreischer was in town. And Bert is as big as it gets. He does arena tours. He goes to a city and sells 12,000, 18,000 tickets, and he was willing to do this comedy club, which seats a few fewer than 12,000 people. So when you're me, you get bumped because I don't sell out arenas. And so they just moved the people who were coming to my shows, they moved them to a different day. And I still got 4 shows. I did 2 Friday, 2 Saturday. So frankly, it was fine. But that does impact my income that you get paid less. So, and I was not asked. It wasn't like, would you be willing to? And again, it's really fine. I understand how that works. I support comedy clubs. Like it's fine. But okay, so I was thinking, I want to meet Bert, but he rolls into town on this big tour bus. Again, he is one of the most famous people in comedy. And because he is doing a big arena tour that, a lot of people would love to be part of. And I'm sorry. See, I asked people to deal with the whining dog at the door, and it wasn't dealt with. And this is an opportunity for me to practice what I preach and take deep breaths and not be triggered by this. So anyway, Bert was, so he was at this small club, and I was like, oh, I would love to meet him. And we have friends in common. I'm 1 degree of separation from him, but I'd never actually met him. So I was trying to think of what I could do to just connect with him and, be part of his network, perhaps in consideration for his next arena tour. And, so I was like, you can't ask the club to introduce you because he is now at a level of celebrity that it's like, yeah, everybody wants to meet him. And it doesn't matter that I was the headliner for the whole weekend. It's like, still everybody wants to meet him. You can't make that ask of the club. So I just showed up to the show just to support, just to check it out. And so I decided to make a bold move. And this is where, for those of you who are socially awkward, such as myself, you can actually, sorry, Caitlin, you can just walk in front of them. This podcast is like such chaos. Okay, the dog has been dealt with. It's just so funny that I asked the dog to be dealt with earlier. That's just so funny that it didn't get dealt with when I'd already made that. Okay,
figured I'd send him out. Okay,
hit the I'm done fixating on the dog whining at the door. Okay, I'm done. Oh, just watch, the cats are gonna. In one of our last episodes, we were trying tinned fish. We spilled it on the carpet. This studio probably still smells like tinned fish. And just watch 5 minutes. The cats are gonna start meowing at the door. Okay. So here's what I would like to say. For those of you who are socially awkward, you can use that as a superpower. Let it make you bold. Be bold. Reach out to that person. Try to connect with that person who seems way above your level, because even when you try to make everything socially go perfectly, it ends up in a disaster anyway. So you might as well just let the social dumpster fire be intentional. Be bold, make big moves, and then when you end up in an absolutely catastrophic social situation, you'll be like, yeah, that's, I knew that was going to happen. So yeah, social awkwardness can totally, it can be a superpower. And so I just thought about that. I was like, if I tried to meet Bert a graceful way, it probably wouldn't work, or it would be weird or whatever. And so I decided to just put on Instagram that my shows were canceled for this one. So I didn't mean for it to be passive aggressive, because I was really fine with it. But I put on Instagram stories, I was supposed to have the Sunday shows tonight, but they canceled them for at Bert Kreischer. And, but I'm fine with that, blah, blah, blah. He is such a good dude. He DM'd me immediately and said, I am so sorry. I thought this was an open spot on the calendar. I did not mean to, because he knows that impacts my income. And so he was like, I am so sorry. He said, come to the green room after the show. I want to apologize personally. And I was like, that actually worked. I can't believe that worked. But that was the risk, is that it could have annoyed the club that I said that my shows were canceled for Bert. And I didn't want to do that. They were very cool. Comedy Zone Greenville, support them. Great staff. I love them. Wonderful club. So I didn't want to get on their bad side, but I did want to be in that green room, and I did want to meet Bert. So it was a calculated risk, and I couldn't believe it when he DM'd me. I was like, I can't believe this actually worked. And so that is the main thing I wanted to share, is just just try it. Just be bold. And it won't always work. He is a busy guy. A gazillion people wanted to meet him, and I wouldn't have been offended in the slightest if that, if it didn't work out or whatever. But especially if you're socially awkward, just do the crazy thing. Just reach out. And yeah, it might be terribly awkward, but it would probably be terribly awkward anyway because you are socially awkward. So just kind of use it as a superpower. So I did get invited to the green room, and this is my life, guys. So in the industry that I am in, being in Bert's green room is a massive flex. Again, he is almost as big as it gets. There are maybe one or two people who sell more than he does, but I mean, every podcast episode, million views, easy. Like, he is huge. And so that's a big thing to be in his green room. So immediately I'm like, this is going to go on my Instagram main feed. I'm putting this on TikTok. I'm putting it on YouTube. Everybody needs to know that what I'm doing with my time is I am hanging out in Bert Kreischer's green room because we are peers, and we just really connected. And actually, it's true that he and I had some great conversations. I did actually chat with him quite a bit. He's wonderful, so gracious. But I did not get to flex on social media because he and the guys he travels with were doing spray tans. And in order to do spray tans, you have to wear, small thong things. Now, if you know anything about Bert Kreischer's presence, he's never fully clothed. So that part was not outrageous. It's like, of course, Bert is not fully clothed in his own green room. He never is. That is part of the Bert Kreischer experience. But to have like multiple men just wearing the thongs for the spray tan, I did a story that I recorded where I was like, hey, just hanging out in Bert Kreischer's green room. And he and two guys walked by. And unfortunately for me, the thongs were flesh colored. It looked so wildly inappropriate. I mean, this would have been, you guys thought I got blowback from the Dita Von Teese thing. Like, this would have been next level. And so I just had to delete the videos, and instead I just posted a nice little picture with him. But he did a reel on his account. It was from like June 7th or something. If you look it up, it's him and the guys in the green room, and you can hear me laughing in the background, but I did not get to post because I was like, this does look, it's not, you just, could the thongs just be like a little more like, or if they were black so that you can see, so anyway, that is my life. Like, that is the comedy of errors that is my life, that I couldn't put it on Instagram because they were doing spray tans. But again, the point is that, just do the crazy thing to meet that person that's, that you would like to meet. Like, I remember one time there was Carolyn Graglia is an author, and she was really big at, this was like in 2002 or something. She had a book that was really going viral, and it was a bestseller. And I was, just totally, I was like barely out of college. And I just thought it would be so cool to even say hi to her. And Joe was like, you should ask her if she wants to have lunch. And I was like, Joe, I'm barely out of college. I've done nothing in my life ever. Like, and he was like, if you don't go ask her, I am going to walk up to her and ask and say, my girlfriend is too shy to ask you this, but she wants to know if you would have lunch with her. And I think Carolyn she was retired at the time, so she was not as crazy busy as she had been in other seasons of life. She and I ended up going to lunch like once a month for quite a few years. To this day, 22 years later, we still exchange Christmas cards, and we write each other nice little notes. And, you know what, even if she had said no, if her kids had still been younger, she would have just had to be like, I can't, I don't have time to go to lunch, which would have been fine. But who knows? Maybe she would have said, here's my email. You could email me with any questions you have. Just be awkward and make the ask. And I would actually say the more kind of famous or successful or whatever you want to call it, the person is who you would like to reach out to, the more they are used to being asked. So they might need to say no. I mean, that 9 times out of 10, you actually do get a no because they're just busy. And a lot of people make these requests. But But they're not offended by it because a lot of people have asked. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to make that a Village Hustle Patreon episode of how I have a better success rate than I think most people's success rate is like 9 times out of 10 you get a no. I'm more like 7 times out of 10 I get a no because of certain little social maneuvering things that I do that have been very effective. I'm going to record a Village Hustle Patreon episode for that. The Village Hustle Patreon is where it's like I'm your life coach, basically. I'm a very cheap life coach if you join the Village Hustle Patreon. And then of course we have the base level Patreon where you get the after party. After each show, we leave the cameras running and I continue on the subject of the main podcast. And when you do the Village Hustle level, you get both. You get the after party and me as your mimosa fueled life coach, and the Patreon links are in the show notes. And I will, Caitlin, help me remember, I will do one on how do I have a fairly high yes rate when I reach up. Like I try to connect with someone who is like technically out of my league. I have a pretty good rate of yeses on that. So although I still get more no's than yeses, let's be very clear on that. All right. So heading into the main topic, I was talking to my friend Leah Darrow about just tough times, and when you're having a hard time, you guys know her baby is struggling for his life in the NICU, and she has 6 other kids, and it's a lot. So we've been talking a lot about just, survival mode and asking for help and things like that. And one of the things I was thinking about the reasons we sometimes don't ask for help. And I think one of the things is that the hard thing about accepting help as an introvert is dealing with other people. When we were going through a hard time and people so generously offered to bring us dinners, I remember thinking I might rather starve than make small talk every day at 5 p.m. I so appreciated it, but for introverts, small talk is like physical assault. And it wasn't that I dislike these people. I'm still good friends with them. But people who are my good friends can tell you, yeah, that it killed Jen. It killed Jen when I showed up at her door with the homemade lasagna and she had to answer my questions about, how are you doing? I see you're not dead yet. That's good. How's the baby? Still in the hospital? Okay. Like it's no, no hate to these people. Not only not hate, but I mean, of course, I so appreciated what they were doing. But, you can be an introvert and be like, small talk kills me. Even though I like this person, I like to be friends with them. And if we could go, when this crisis passes, if we could go have a deep conversation, just the two of us, great. But this whole standing at my doorway while my house is falling apart and chit chat about, oh my gosh, so how are the kids really still doing well in school? Johnny got straight A's again? How fun. Well, like I'm getting calls from the hospital that something insane is going on with my baby. It's like, I can't do it. So, yeah, fellow introverts, I think it is actually okay to like, you know what I should have pretended I was more sick than I was. I should have been like, it should have been like, Jen's bedridden. And it's tougher in the days of Instagram stories because I can't stay off of stories. So if it happened now, Caitlin knows how true this is. She's laughing at the ring of truth that it would be like, Joe would be like, Jen is in such bad shape. She literally can't get out of bed. And they'd be like, they'd pull up their phone, like, but this is her water skiing on Instagram stories with her phone in selfie mode. And he'd be like, well, that was an archived, that was from a different time. And they'd be like, well, she was shouting like, I love water skiing on June 26th, 2024 at 1:15 p.m. And he'd be like, yeah, that was, what? She has an evil twin. It's time that I told you that. But I think you guys should do it seriously. If you're an introvert and you need to accept help, you have my permission to fake an illness. Seriously, just be like, I have scabies. Well, I don't even know what scabies is. You can be like, yes, you can bring me that dinner. And I really appreciate it. And I don't think the crabs are contagious. I don't think. Oh wait, crabs are like a. Oh wait, I'm thinking bed bugs. Sorry, I was thinking bed bugs. Well, either but just to make sure they don't talk to you, you could say both. You could be like, I think. Yeah, you know what? Yeah. Okay, so this is what you do. All right. When your extrovert friends are like, hey, I'm on my way with a homemade lasagna that I made, and I can't wait to just sit down with you over a cup of tea and catch up when I drop off this food. You could be like, great. Because I have both crabs and bed bugs, but I think they're fighting each other actually. And so maybe they'll like cancel each other out. Like it's kind of a war. And I think maybe they'll just all die. I bet they won't come in. In. That's what you need to do. That, yes, you could be like, my whole house has fleas and bed bugs. So you should probably, and lice, throw that. Yeah. Yes. So, they will start leaving the food on the sidewalk. They won't even come on your property. They won't even come on your lawn. So I just want to tell you that you have my permission to make up a little fiction. Because look, when you're in survival mode, the extroverts don't understand. They don't understand. When I had people dropping off food who would make conversation with me, frankly, this would be hard now. But when we were when I had the pulmonary embolisms and the baby was in the hospital and it was all very, very bad, we had so many money problems and it was just all craziness. It was like a physical assault when people would come in and sit on my couch and talk to me. I mean, it was like they were hitting me in the face with a baseball bat for every minute they were there. And so I think that, maybe coming up with spinning a little yarn about why you are not able to socialize, I think it's for everyone's safety. Frankly, I think it is good for everyone's safety that you do that. Okay, let us get to the main topic. This idea. Okay, so again, the reason I want to talk to you guys about triggers and trauma, which we're not calling triggers and trauma, is because I think it might be impacting your life in ways that you don't realize. It can make you have a real controlling streak if you're very controlling with your kids and with your spouse. And if you can't let go, if you can't let your husband hang out with the kids in the way that he wants to, and you're always up in everyone's business and freaking out and overscheduling your kids and all up in their business. I mean, maybe that's just who you are, but it could also be a sign of trauma, which is to say unprocessed stress. And here's how this came up. So we just did a week-long family vacation at an AirBNB, which was preceded by a trip to where my husband has his very small, modest boat, the Houston Yacht Club. Now, again, when you hear yacht club, you think of certain things. Some of them are maybe accurate, but it's like we have a small boat. We live out of town, so we get a discounted rate. It's not quite what you think, but and it was very. I really had to work to not be triggered. I'll shift into the new language in a minute. To not be triggered into not being my best self in those situations. And I took a step back and I was like, so these are my big problems, is that I'm struggling being at a yacht club and then at a luxury Airbnb. Because this vacation we took with my mom, we have a family of 8. My mom was with us. So that's 9 people. So, I mean, we get freaking mansions when we have to, when we do vacations, and my mom kindly pays for it. She worked very hard in her career, came up from nothing, and now she can buy nice Airbnbs when we travel. And so, I mean, this was a nice one. It was hilltop, pool, looking on this cliff, looking out over a river and all that. It was gorgeous. And it was really, really nice. And I was really struggling emotionally just with certain things that family vacations bring up for me. And I was just laughing at myself. I was like, I literally can't be at a yacht club or an Airbnb. because it's too triggering for me. Try saying that publicly. Can you imagine if I had put that on social media? If I had done a video like, hey guys, look, I need you to pray for me. I am at the yacht club right now, and just certain things are really triggering me. And if you guys could just pray, I will start a GoFundMe if you guys want to, just contribute anything. That would be great. And then I do another update. Hey guys, okay, I'm done. I did make it through the yacht club. Thank you so much for lifting me up in prayer. I'm now at a luxury AirBNB mansion on a cliffside with a beautiful pool that's being paid for by someone else. And I'm just struggling. I am. And if you guys, because I've been triggered, and if you guys could pray for that, I would really, I'd be flamed off the internet. If you guys would find a way to delete my account, you would unfollow me, and you should, like Caitlin would unfollow me. I'd be like, why can't I find Caitlin's account anymore? Because she blocked me, as she should. But here's the thing. It's not that this is so important for you to understand this about trauma and triggers. Listen to this and listen carefully. Are you ready? I'm going to give you a second to take notes here. Get your pencil. Even if you're driving, just get your pencil.
Pull over first.
Yes. No, it's that important. No, I'm kidding. Kidding. Listen, it's not to say that you have been triggered by something, meaning it is bringing up unprocessed stress, does not mean that this is the worst thing in your life. This does not mean this is the hardest thing in your life. It means it is an area of unprocessed stress. So because of this, I am standing by my statement when I say I was way, way more triggered being at a luxury Airbnb because it was a family vacation, which brings up triggers for me, than I was when I almost died of bilateral pulmonary embolisms. Well, and then actually more recently, you guys remember in January, look up the January podcast episodes, I was diagnosed with a massive blood clot in a major vein on January 26th. But we had a podcast taping scheduled that day, and the doctors were like, this is so serious. Like, the whole hematologist thing played out after that. So I got out of the ER. I'd been in there for 6 hours. I got out at 4 p.m. and it was like unclear what the survival rate was going to be here. It was a very dire situation. And I went to the pharmacy. I picked up the emergency medicine they gave me. And then I did the podcast episode. We did an episode. Look it up. It was January of. You know what? You guys, just so you guys can hear that one. That was. It wasn't Dumpster Fire. I think. Yeah. Wait, Dumpster Fire or My Diagnosis, episode 192. My Diagnosis. So because I wasn't triggered by that. I also, one time I was in a very serious car accident, like I was taken away by ambulance and all that. I wasn't that stressed about it because that didn't trigger me. It didn't touch on unprocessed trauma. For example, when one of my kids, not the baby who was in the NICU, but a different kid had a very major, very serious, potentially with lifelong implications, medical issue come up. Again, that problem was 10,000 million times bigger than anything I dealt with on the family vacation, but it did not trigger me. So it's so important to make that distinction between saying something can be a problem. It can involve a lot of sadness and worry and stress, but you're still in your right mind. You're in your right mind. When the thing happened with my other kid, when my own, almost dying multiple times from blood clot issues, these were very big problems. I had a lot of anxiety. I had certain fears. I was stressed, but I was in my right mind. I was as normal and mentally healthy as I ever get, which granted is a low bar, but I was my best self dealing with these issues. Now, let's take a family vacation. Guys, I'm not myself when I am triggered because what triggers do is they put your brain neurologically back into the state when the trigger first happened. So I end up reacting, like, frankly, literally like a child, because my brain is not functioning the right way because I had some unprocessed stress. And the unprocessed stress didn't come from anything horrific. You know, it wasn't like some massive, terrible abuse or tragedy or anything like that. But I think because I was an only child, we moved frequently. And, you know, my dad was often not around. He just had jobs where he was living in other states for a lot of my childhood, and my mom was, you know, busy and she was a mathematician. You know, I mean, it's not like, you know, it's not like an Italian mama who's like, oh, come here, let's cry together. My mom listens to this podcast, so I'm just saying, like, my mother is so wonderful. That wasn't the vibe, you know, in our house. And so I think there were times when maybe just of my own choosing, I didn't open up to anyone. You know, I had no friends. And I would experience something difficult and stressful, and something would hurt my feelings or hurt me, but I had no release. I had no friends. I could talk to my cat, and I did. I talked to my cat, and I talked to my imaginary friends, literally. Oddly enough, that didn't really help. And so the craziest things trigger me into that mindset of when the original hurt happened, and it makes my brain function differently. And this is actually confirmed by neuroscience. So here I am about to read you a couple of long passages that will be totally worth it. See, look, I read books so that you don't have to. The value that you get from I mean, if you paid $20 an episode from this podcast, I'd be like, that you're stealing from me. I mean, it's just so the quality of this podcast. Okay. So this is from the book that everyone has to read. This is required reading. You have to read it at some point in your life, called The Body Keeps the Score. Even if you are a paragon of mental health, you should still read it, because someone you know is probably crazy, and probably because of the issues in this book. And by the way, so much of the sage wisdom that I have been sharing with you so far on this podcast is from this book and books like it. Like, if you go to Amazon and it's like customers also bought The Body Keeps the Score is the one you start with, but then just like read everything in the genre. But again, it's seriously, you have to read it or listen to the audiobook at some point. It is required. Now, I am about to read you a story that this is a true story. This is from the book The Body Keeps the Score, about this couple, and it will prove my point about how when you are in a situation that reminds your brain of past trauma, which is to say unprocessed stress, you're not the same person you were 2 seconds ago. Your brain starts functioning as if you are a different person. Okay, so now here's the thing. This involves a couple. The husband's name is Stan, Stan, and the wife's name it's spelled UTE. We had a lot of issues prepping this episode. It took us fully an hour and a half to get the camera dealt with, the lighting. But I think probably 68 minutes of that prep was figuring out how to pronounce this lovely woman's name. How do you pronounce the female name UTE? So Caitlin looked up YouTube videos that said Ute. Mm-hmm. And we were like, no, I think that's a tribe or something. So maybe that's good for them, but I think that's not the woman's name. So then Caitlin and I decided on Ute, right?
Yeah.
And then I text my husband, always, that never decreases the chaos, talking to my husband. So what did he say? Let's read this on YouTube. You can see I'm posting this screenshot. It says, I think it's German, and I think it is pronounced, Caitlin, what does that say? Utah. So if Joe were to see this written, he'd be like, hello, Utah. And he has, Fulwiler, he has German ancestry. So maybe he knows Utah. By the way, everything I'm about to tell you, it has a happy ending. Both of these people, what I'm reading here is true, but they healed, and it's like, it's all okay. So should we go with Utah? Or what did we say? Ute?
Ute. Ute just sounds better.
Okay, we'll do
More
Ute.
accurate.
All right.
Probably totally wrong still.
Okay. Ute. Okay. So, all right. So this is from The Body Keeps the Score, and I'm going to read at length because this is really interesting, and this will change your life. I'm serious. This is really, really fascinating. And so I want to set this up by explaining what happened to these two people, Stan and Uta, according to my husband, Ute. Okay. So again, I'm reading from the book. I'll do my should I do my voice when I read audiobooks?
Oh, yeah.
I am an audio. I did my own audiobooks. Okay. And one time someone asked why a man was reading it. So that's good when people like podcast listeners think a man read my audiobook. Okay. On a fine September morning in 1998, Stan and Ute Lawrence, a professional couple in their 40s, set out from their home in Ontario to attend a business meeting in Detroit. Halfway through the journey, they ran into a wall of dense fog that reduced visibility to zero in a split second. Stan immediately slammed on the brakes, coming to a standstill sideways on the highway, just missing a huge truck. An 18-wheeler went flying over the trunk of their car. Vans and cars slammed into them and to each other. People who got out of their cars were hit as they ran for their lives. The ear-splitting crashes went on and on. With each jolt from behind, they felt this would be the one that killed them. Stan and Ute were trapped in car number 13 of an 87-car pileup. It was the worst road disaster in Canadian history. Then came the eerie silence. Stan struggled to open doors and windows, but the 18-wheeler that had crushed their truck was wedged against the car. Someone pounded on the roof. A girl was screaming, "Get me out of here." The next thing they knew, a truck driver was standing on the hood of their car with a fire extinguisher. He smashed the windshield to free them, and Stan climbed through the opening. Turning around to help his wife, he saw Ute sitting frozen in her seat. Stan and the truck driver lifted her out, and an ambulance took them to an emergency room. Aside from a few cuts, they were found to be physically unscathed. Okay, so wow. So they went through something very, very difficult. And again, notice the theme there, by the way, of powerlessness. I said earlier, I think that is, this is sort of my personal theory, but I think other people have said it too, or maybe I'm just making it up. But I do think that you are more likely to have that buildup of unprocessed stress when you are in a powerless situation. And doesn't that, I mean, that kind of, maybe I'm making that up, but it kind of sounds right. Because let's say that you're at a bar and you're like, I don't like the look of that guy, so I'm going to fight him. And you walk up and you're like, hey, let's fight. And you punch him in the face. And let's say you end up getting beat up pretty badly. I don't think you'd have a lot of unprocessed stress because you'd be like, that was kind of, I kind of had control over that situation and that one was sort of on me. But anything that happened in childhood, you were kind of powerless because you, as a child, you simply did not have agency over your life. And then if you look at what happened with Stan and Ute, they were in a powerless situation. They couldn't get out of the car, even though flames were creeping towards them and everything was on fire. So I do think if you're looking out for things that might have caused unprocessed stress in your life, look for situations where you were powerless. Okay, so here's the crazy thing. So the doctor who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, so he goes on, so he's talking about people who have really any kind of unprocessed stress and trauma. And he says people who suffer from flashbacks, which is, he's talking about what I would say, being triggered, often organize their lives around trying to protect against them. They may compulsively go to the gym to pump iron, numb themselves with drugs, or try to cultivate an illusory, I think that's how you pronounce that, sense of control in highly dangerous situations. such as constantly fighting unseen dangers. And isn't it interesting that if you look at people who are really into mountain climbing, like solo mountain climbing, I don't mean just casually, but like they're kind of obsessed with doing crazy, dangerous mountain climbs. Or frankly, David Goggins, I am his biggest fan. But I've said before that this is a guy who's working really hard not to feel his feelings. And his whole platform and his whole life is he's literally running, physically running from not sitting with what happened to him. And a lot of people who are obsessed with working out to that kind of crazy degree, like, I don't care if my ankle's broken and my toe was just ripped off in an accident, I'm hitting my 18 miles today. Like, that's 100% you have unprocessed trauma that you are running from, literally running from, if you have that mentality. And it's funny, I've always noticed that about the mountain climbing people, that and again, I don't mean the people who just casually do it, but the people who are really obsessed with it and gravitate towards the dangerous things. It's like, you're running from your feelings. You are trying not to feel something. You are running away from those triggers. And I say that with zero criticism, because I am completely open about the fact it's one of the reasons that sometimes I overuse alcohol, because I'm in a situation like being at a luxury Airbnb where I should be fine. Any sane person would not only be fine, they'd be living their best life. And I'm having all this anxiety. I'm having shallow breathing. My heart is racing. I feel unloved. I feel abandoned. I feel panicky. And then it's so stupid. I'm like, I shouldn't feel this way. This is so stupid. And you know what makes it go away is a nicely made vodka tonic. And it actually works. The problem is there are a lot of downsides to that. So I have no criticism for David Goggins and the mountain climbing people or whatever. A lot of us do it in some way. And I just want to say, anyone who is in the Catholic ghetto has seen this. There is a certain type of person who does this with their religion too, that I've seen a lot of these people that they are very obsessed with the idea that everyone's out to get them and they're being persecuted, and just the government at every turn is spying on them and wants to take down them and everyone in their religion. And they're always doing like purity tests. Like if they follow people who are part of their religion, it's like, I saw what that person said on Instagram stories. I don't think they're really one of us. And, they're just constantly creating battles to fight within their religion. And again, like, just like working out can be a good thing. Some of it's true. I mean, Lord knows with my religion, no one's like, everybody loves Catholics. Like certainly there is some legit persecution, but I'm talking about people who make it their whole personality. They think and talk about it all day, every day. I'm actually thinking of someone in particular who is very dear to us, who in this case, it wasn't religion. They weren't religious, but they were a prepper. And they were like, the New World Order is coming for us. The Illuminati and BlackRock. And I forget. They used to say Bohemian Grove too. And then my husband went to Bohemian Grove. And so they were like, well, maybe that one's okay. And so, they're like the Illuminati, the New World Order is taking over. We have to, prep. We have to have our bunkers. And it's like, you've been saying this since 1998. So I think the Illuminati suck. Like, these guys are not good at executing anything, because like you've been talking about how they are going to take over for more than 20 years now, and they haven't gotten it done. So I don't think we need to worry about them, actually. Like I think it'll be fine, but ultimately, and I happen to know this person well enough to know something about their past, and I realized, oh, that's how they run from their triggers. This person didn't drink like I do. By the way, I'm taking a break from that to get my mental act together here. So this person, they didn't use my coping mechanism of alcohol. They used, the bogeyman of all these, the government was always out to get them, and the New World Order was coming. And, so, and again, maybe there's a grain of truth to it. I mean, Lord knows I would not sit here and say, like, I don't think the CIA has ever done anything shady. Like, absolutely. I think it's just been all on the up and up. No, my father was a Green Beret. I've heard enough through the grapevine to know that certainly shady things go on without the public knowing about it. But we're talking about people who, like, if you think and talk about the persecution of your religion, are the people you follow on social media accurately following your religion? Are they one of us? You know, are the people in your family like doing your religion correctly? Or if you think about like the government coming to get you, or, you know, all these nefarious forces that are supposedly out to get you, or if you're, you know, thinking about how much you need to exercise, or how much you need to like free solo Yosemite or whatever. If that is crossing your mind more than like 3 times a day, I really think you're running from some triggers. Also, if you have chronic pain, I think that's another way for people who do none of that, but they have medical issues that just, they've been to a million doctors and nobody can find anything wrong. I'm telling you, I think it really might be unprocessed trauma. So, okay, so to go back to the book, let's look at, we're going to look at MRIs. This is what you get. You follow a comedian's podcast to learn about neuroplasticity and all this and MRIs. Okay, let's pull up the MRI of Stan. So this is Stan. This is the husband. So it says here from The Body Keeps the Score. Stan's amygdala made no distinction between past and present. Oh, wait, I should have told you. Okay, so this is, he had an MRI while they intentionally triggered him into, they brought up something that made him think of the terrible car accident, and they watched his brain on an MRI. So this is Stan's brain while he was triggered into something reminded him of the car accident. They say, Stan's amygdala made no distinction between past and present. It activated just as if the car crash were happening in the scanner, triggering powerful stress hormones and nervous system responses. The 2 white areas in front, JF on youtube.com if you would like to see this, the 2 white areas in front of the brain on the top of the picture are the right and left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. When those areas are deactivated, people lose their sense of time and become trapped in the moment without a sense of past, present, or future. This is so important. Listen again. When those areas are deactivated, I won't even say what they are again because we all know these terms mean nothing to any of us. When those areas are deactivated, people lose their sense of time and become trapped in the moment without a sense of past, present, or future. So, all right, you can take that down, Caitlin. So that really resonates with what happened to me on vacation, because one of the things that triggers me is I have a thing where if I feel like I have done something that like I'm not keeping people happy. Like it's my job to keep people happy, and I do feel that way on vacation, and I have done something bad that has made someone I care about unhappy. Like I messed up. I didn't get the A+, like I messed up. Trauma brain instantly. So again, we're going to redo these words. Instead of trauma, we'll say unprocessed stress, and instead of trigger, we'll say shift. So in those moments, my brain is shifted into these same neurological patterns that you see with Stan. And I find it very interesting that The Body Keeps the Score book talks about how when like the smart parts of your brain shut down, you lose a sense of past, present, and future. Because one of the things I noticed on vacation is if someone seemed unhappy, like if I chose a restaurant and one of the kids didn't seem to be having fun, it's the craziest thing, but instantaneously, I would feel like this is like permanent, like this. And if you've ever been shifted, shall we say, I would not have logically said this. Obviously, I know it's not true, but somewhere deep down inside, it felt like this is forever. This kid being unhappy is eternal. and there is no coming back from this. And this is just, it's like, it's irrevocable. I have done something irrevocably wrong by, bringing us to a restaurant that this one person in my freaking party of 9, that one person didn't like. That is exactly what trauma brain looks like. And that is exactly what a trigger is, because it reminded me of something in my past that is simply unprocessed stress. This original source of stress, I know where it came from, and it wasn't anything super traumatic. It was just from some interactions. Frankly, a lot of them were with my dad. God rest his soul. Wonderful man, very kind man. But he had his own issues, and there were just some stressful interactions that I never processed that lead me to flip out and go into shifted brain when I feel like I have let someone down, or my actions have not kept everyone perfectly happy. Okay, so there is another part of the brain that is impacted when you touch on unprocessed stress. So the authors, I actually forget his name. You would think that I would have gotten that. Could you Google Caitlin, who is the author of The Body Keeps the Score? Okay, he says, the context and meaning of an experience are determined by the system that includes the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, they call that the DLPFC, and the hippocampus. The DLPFC tells us how our present experience relates to the past and how it may affect the future. You can think of it as the timekeeper of the brain, knowing that whatever happens is finite and will sooner or later come to an end makes the experience more tolerable. So again, when you've been shifted into unprocessed stress neurological patterns, you lose that sense of context. You lose that sense that, this too shall pass. Someone might tell you like, oh, this too shall pass. You don't feel that when you're in trauma brain. Okay. Stan's scan reveals why people can recover from trauma only when the brain structures that were knocked out during the original experience are fully back online. So, and this, see if this sounds familiar to some of you. He says people with this unprocessed stress have their floodgates wide open. Lacking that brain filter, they are on constant sensory overload. In order to cope, they try to shut themselves down, and they develop tunnel vision and hyper focus. Remember what we were saying about people who are obsessive about working out, drinking, climbing mountains, religion, whatever. If they can't shut down naturally, they may enlist drugs or alcohol, to block out the world. The tragedy is that the price of closing down includes filtering out sources of pleasure and joy as well. Oof. Does that not sound like people with some unprocessed stress? It's like our prepper, I don't want to say who it was, but the prepper who we knew and loved so well, it was like, yeah, he didn't have a lot of joy in his life. All he knew was the struggle. That's how you know who in your life, and maybe it's you, has a lot of unprocessed stress that they haven't dealt with. It's the people that all they know is the struggle. And there's just no room in their life for anything other than, fighting this supposed persecution that they're facing all day, every day, or getting to their workouts, or frankly, the struggle of, being an addict, like finding their fix, like that sort of thing. If you know someone who all they know and kind of all they want is the struggle, they are running from trauma brain because they don't know how to deal with it. So, and then he also goes into the fact that in Ute's case, I think we're just going with Ute. He says it's possible to guess why she responded very differently from Stan. Pull up Ute's brain scan. So look at that. Nothing on her brain scan. Like her brain just went offline, the whole thing. And remember when we heard the story of what happened in the accident, Ute was stuck in the car. She couldn't get herself out because she was so frozen. So the author here says she was utilizing a survival strategy her brain had learned in childhood to cope with her mother's harsh treatment. Ute's father died when she was 9, and her mother subsequently was often very nasty and demeaning to her. At some point, Ute discovered that she could block out in her mind when her mother she could blank out in her mind when her mother yelled at her. 35 years later, when she was trapped in her demolished car, Ute's brain automatically went into that same blank out survival mode. She made herself disappear. So, for people who had difficult situations in childhood, if the best coping strategy was just disappearing, then these people might find that they just dissociate. They just completely freak out and blank out when difficult things happen. And so you could react like Stan, like there's the David Goggins Stan approach to just you run, or the Doomsday Prepper approach. Like you're just constantly, finding phantoms to fight to keep yourself busy. Or there is just the dissociate and shut down. But you just kind of a blank stare generally in life, or like when, like if people are expressing emotions that make you uncomfortable, you just kind of shut down. You just dissociate. You're just not fully there. And that's kind of what, like, I think that's what those of us who use alcohol as a coping mechanism try to do. It's like, we just want to shut down. We just want to disappear and make all of the discomfort and the crazy thoughts go away. So, okay, hopefully I have convinced you that even if you didn't have a objectively traumatic childhood, you could still have some unprocessed stress, and you could be shifted, the word we're using instead of triggered, you can be shifted into that mindset of unprocessed stress when things come up that remind you of those situations, like me at the luxury Airbnb. It is massively shifting for me when I feel like I can't keep people happy, and it is my job to keep people happy. And like I am being judged for my inability to keep people happy. Guys, I lose it. Like my stress level is 10 out of 10. And again, when I was diagnosed with bilateral pulmonary embolisms that it wasn't clear that I was going to survive, my stress level was like, it was like a 3 in the sense of, I was worried, but it was just like, well, what can I do about it? I just took, a normal, healthy, sane approach to the whole thing. But man, I'm on vacation and I feel that like I'm under the microscope to keep people happy and I'm failing. Ooh, just trauma brain out the wazoo. So, okay. So what do you do if you get shifted into these moments where your stress response is just completely inappropriate to the situation and your brain is just completely misfiring because of unprocessed stress? You know what? We may need to go into this in the next episode. We are already an hour and 17 minutes in. So I won't go into the whole thing of what has worked for me. We'll do that. Caitlin, remind me to actually do that in the next episode. But read the book, The Body Keeps the Score. But you know what, guys? A lot of it is actually not that complicated. A lot of it is you need to just feel it. You need to stop resisting that, the old pains and the old emotions. And like what helped me, for example, at the Airbnb is I would just get out a journal and I would just vent. And I intentionally did this on my computer so that I could delete all my crazy talk when I was done. But just the craziest thoughts in the world, like nobody loves me and everyone thinks I'm a effing failure. It got dark and it got crazy, but those are the crazy trauma brain thoughts. And I dumped them all out. And then when I saw them, I was like, okay, yeah, none of that is accurate, but that is what was in my head. And I took a deep breath and then I took a walk and I tried to just kind of still my mind and I prayed and all of that. And it actually got me out of that trauma brain mode. There's actually not a ton more to it than that. And even the experts would tell you that as well. But we will follow up on that in episode, what is this? This is 211. So episode 212, I will go into that more, that what to do. But honestly, this is one of those situations where just knowing that this exists and knowing that it is absolutely okay to acknowledge that you have some unprocessed stress and that you are occasionally shifted into trauma brain, even if you had an okay childhood, that you're 90% of the way there. If you just know that and accept that, the resolution of it is actually pretty simple. There's not nearly as much to say about that. So we ask again, how is this podcast free? What you can do to pay me back for the sage wisdom that I just entirely ripped off from The Body Keeps the Score here on this podcast is go join my live on Thursday, July 11th at 7 p.m. Central. I would love for you guys to chat with me, and be sure and like and share my Maternal Instinct comedy special when it comes out on the 800-Pound Gorilla YouTube on Thursday, July 11th. Another fine episode in the books. We will be back with you next week. I don't think we're taking any time off for the rest of this summer. Hopefully not. Although Caitlin and I will need to sit down and think about that, actually. Anyway, we will definitely be back next week here on the Jen Fulwiler Show.